Okay, let's talk a little bit more about how evil might seem like it's freedom, but it isn't. Because
that's a pretty important point. And it's freedom one, but not freedom two.
Yeah, like it's sort of freedom, but it's sort of not freedom. But that is not how it feels. I think you'd get a lot of people saying, what are you even talking about? So Swedenborg anticipates this in New Jerusalem 144. No matter how similar they look on the surface, freedom to do good and freedom to do evil are as different and remote from each other as heaven and hell. The freedom to do good comes from heaven and is called heavenly freedom, while the freedom to do evil comes from hell and is called hellish freedom. That actually, according to Swedenborg, the ability itself like beams into you from the spiritual world, either from the Lord through heaven or up from hell. The actual animating force in you is different when you're doing those two actions.
This is blowing my mind a little bit because I think of freedom as being almost like a switch on a railroad or something where you can, it can be this, a light switch or anything where it could be this way, it could be that way. And yet Swedenborg's saying this is one kind of freedom. That's a different, those are two different, freedom is not this thing, it's not the switch. This is one freedom, that's another freedom.
Yes.
And this is heavenly freedom, this is hellish freedom.
Which is different than people generally think of freedom. They think of freedom, right, as the switch controller. But this does, again, though, it does line up with the idea that freedom is being able to do what you want. And he's saying that the feeling of wanting to do good is freedom, a certain kind of freedom, and the freedom of wanting to do evil. Wanting to do evil is a kind of freedom. Wanting to do good is a kind of freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like kind of different. He's kind of redefining it, but he's kind of giving you the definition you actually would think when you just, what is freedom? So it's like, it's this weird, it's kind of both.
And as he so often does, he points back to where is this coming from?
Yeah.
He's not actually actions are terribly important to Swedenborg, but where did it come from? Why did you do that? What was the motivation? He keeps pointing your attention back up the chain to what was it? What was in your heart and what was flowing into your heart that you were responding to? And that's where that action came from.
Well, that's terribly important to human beings. This is the difference between first-degree murder and manslaughter.
Oh, true.
Is it, were you trying to? This is why in movies...
Did you intend? Did you think about it ahead of time? Or was this sort of spontaneous? Was this just
even
rash moment?
That's like how the courts of the world run.
Yeah, that's right.
Because what we really care about is your intent. And
not that you just sort of flamed up, something made you angry and you just acted out in that second. But if you contemplated it for 3 years and got the necessary equipment, that's darker.
And even that you could have done the same thing, you could ended up causing death, but you weren't trying to. That's it. It's not. There's nothing, but it's very different.
It's completely different. Yeah.
It's a very what you're thinking. This is why in movies it will drive me crazy when there's like a misunderstanding where the guy does something that's the wrong thing to do, and the girl is like, "How could you do that when you something?" And he wasn't trying to do that,
right.
And they don't like communicate that. It's like it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing.
Right.
To the extent that we have the one freedom, we do not have the other. No one can serve two masters. He quotes Matthew 6.
So there's your switch.
Yeah.
It's one way or the other way. So that's an important point. The freedom is not that you could do both at once. The option, you're going one side or the other.
Yeah, right. And you sort of can toggle while you're in the world, you toggle a bit, but I think you have overall something comes to dominate.
Yes.
You get, it's like, no, you stay in this, you stay with it switched to the right for long enough. And that's kind of where, I don't know,
especially in your grown up life when, you have all the capacities and everything that goes with being an adult.
So here's an interesting angle on that. We can also see from this that people who have hellish freedom see it as slavery and bondage if they are not allowed to will what is evil and think what is false whenever they like it, while people who have heavenly freedom loathe to will anything evil and to think anything false. And if they are forced to do so, it torments them.
I love that. That's very typical Swedenborg, isn't it? That your definitions switch. That's what's so slippery about these things, is that to someone who's in a certain state, that would be bondage and slavery not to be allowed. Freedom is let me do the thing that I love doing.
Yeah.
Leave me alone. Let me do it. Remove the obstacles. Let me do more of this and get rid of all the other nonsense in life. That's just fascinating.
Well, it's like, I moved into this area. There's a whole bunch of squares here. They don't go out. They don't. I want to be. Like, we're not allowed to. I don't know. Whatever. Like no public profanity. Come on, man. Like, let me do. Versus other people who are like, what? The last thing I want to do is go out to a club right now. Are you kidding me? I would hate that. So it's like a silly example, but you definitely get this. People with differing loves and lifestyles feel constricted if they're in the wrong area.
Yes. Very familiar human experience, isn't it?
So these two different kinds of freedom lead to two different kinds of selfhood, according to Swedenborg.
Selfhood. Okay, now there's another key word. What does that mean?
And this is something he alluded to way back in the beginning. And you think, why are you packing this into your sentence? But if you go all the way back to 141, he says at the end, this is why anything we do freely seems to us to have come from ourselves. And you're like, well, why do you put that in there?
It seems to come from ourselves.
That's okay. You should have gotten rid of that sentence. But here's where it matters.
Okay.
He says, since acting from freedom seems to come to us from ourselves, this is me being me.
This is me.
Like,
right.
How much are people talking about, like, me. I need to express myself?
Yes.
I need to express myself. Be authentic to who I am.
This is who I am.
Now, to Swedenborg and Bob Dylan, you're always expressing somebody. You're either expressing the heavenly side of you, which is really God coming through heaven and coming out of you, or you're expressing what hell wants you to express. But yet, no matter if we're doing it in freedom, we feel like this is just who I am, and this wants to be expressed as who I am.
That's right. So there's a very important concept in there that there's two selves, at least two that you could be. There's a good self or an evil self, and so your authentic. Well, which self?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Which part are you manifesting?
In the beginning, you quoted scripture when you said, from how far you have fallen. This is, again, you just look at movies and things. It's like the classic, this guy used to be the best fighter pilot around here, but now look at him. He's like, his life is a mess. He's together, but it's like, come on, we need you for one more mission that only you can do. It's because there's like, no, this is who you could have been.
He starts getting up early and exercising.
I can hear that montage music right now. It's because there's like who you could have been. And so there's like the potential for you to be the good version of you or to be the bad version of you.
Yeah.
And this is, so Swedenborg says.
People talk about an evil twin, don't they? Like my evil twin did that. Yeah. That concept is out there.
Yep. Since acting from freedom seems to us to come from ourselves, heavenly freedom can also be called heavenly selfhood. And hellish freedom can be called hellish selfhood. Hellish selfhood is the sense of self into which we are born, and it is evil. Heavenly selfhood, though, is the sense of self into which we come as we are reformed, and it is good.
Wow. So it gets right down to even the selfhood, which I can see how connected that is with the idea of freedom, because that's who you feel. I made this choice. This is what I choose. This is, and pretty soon that becomes, this is who I am.
This is who I am.
This is who I am. I like this. I prefer this. I'd rather not do that, or I can't do this. Or so that selfhood, it's amazing to think about. And a little chilling, again, to think that basically Swedenborg seems to be saying we all start out with a bad selfhood.
Well,
even though you can see sweet traits in little kids and stuff like that he talks about where that comes from, the heavens flowing through them and stuff like that. But still, basically, he's saying we're all dealt a bad hand, and we have to trade in cards to get a better hand. We have to do something. We have to cultivate that soil. We have to do something to get to that heavenly selfhood, and that's what puts such an urgency on messages like this to me. Is that you've got lots of messages in the world saying, in effect, be your worst self, or lots of support for being insane or out of control or something. And there's lots of support. There's lots of self-help or lots of things out there telling you, no, be a good person.
Yeah.
But it's so important because that's the harder, the narrow path, right? That's the narrow way, is to try to be more heavenly. But
it's pretty obvious in some ways that we start out with a bad will. Just look at what you were like when you were a youth. So yesterday was my 40th birthday.
Is that right?
And somebody,
happy birthday.
Somebody said here in the office said like, oh yeah, life begins at 40. And I was like, I'm into that. I would do that. And I was Zoom meeting with someone, and we had Zoomed a lot of times. Like we knew each other well, but he didn't realize how old I was. And he's like, oh, I thought you were more like 36 or something. And I was like, hey man, no, I don't want to be, because I think of myself at 36. And even just 4 years ago, I'm like, I'd much rather be me now. But if you just look back at what my priorities were when I was 20 and what I thought was that, no, like that will, even the stuff that I thought shone so brightly and was so good. No offense to Adam, who's here at the camera. How old are you?
22.
Okay, you're doing great. You're better than I was at 22.
Yeah, that's
he
for
said
sure.
He was at 22. But what I'm trying to say is it gets better. And for me, it's obvious. Like, oh yeah, no, there has been times when I was a person who now I'm like, that's not that great. That's not so great that you're being like that. But at the time, I felt like this is so who I am.
Yeah.
And I think it does. I think this is the trajectory of life shows you like stuff that you used to feel like that's core to who I am. You come to realize it's not as sparkly as I thought it was. And what is really, even what I admire in people, and what I find to be admirable and noble and true and good in people, that's changed. When you're really young, like I was thinking about when I was a teenager, and I used to have this sense of obviously like social performance is everything, and I always thought like, well, I don't want to be one of those grown-ups that kind of like forgets what it was like to be a teenager. I thought like I'm going to go through, but now I'm like, why would I care at all what it's like to be a teenager? You don't know what you're talking about. Meaning the things, and this is not true for all teenagers all the time, but for me in certain states in there, the things that you venerate and that you honor and that you think are so great and cool, those things aren't. Those things are dumb. That's dumb. Yeah. So I can look back at myself and see, oh, sure, I've had all kinds of things that just felt so much like me and they're good, that now I'm like, well, I'm glad that's not really me, because I have a different sense. It's just what you start with, your default settings. Everybody, when you're in high school, everybody just says, that person is the most good looking and they are the most popular, so they are the best. And you don't care at all about how people treat each other. You don't care at all about the fact that people, I used to be like, Mom, why are you making me invite everyone to my birthday? I only want to invite these people. Now I'm like, the only thing that is cool is inviting everyone to your birthday, because what matters way more is like the people who are struggling. Like we want them to feel good. That's changed. I didn't see that then. And now I do. And just the side by side, those two things are in different leagues, man. So it's the heavenly selfhood understands that. The hellish selfhood does not. And I'm glad that I'm getting to become more and more this person. I've still got plenty of hellish selfhood in me. I mean, it's obvious to anyone who's spent any time with me. But there's a little bit of heavenly selfhood in there, which is like, that's God did that. We can't do that, but it's good when it happens.
It just strikes me that the switching the pleasures around is so hard, because a lot of it, like what you do as a default when you're young, is it just feels good. It felt really good to me when I was younger to make fun of people, to be able to, mock them. A friend of mine and I would sit on a bench in the mall and look at people go by, and we just stereotype them and sort of make fun of them. It was tremendous fun, and we felt superior and everything. We were just two very sad, pathetic people, And I have no interest in going back to that bench and sitting there and mocking people. The only valuable thing in there was some sense of noticing somebody outside of yourself and trying to assess in some way, who is this person? What do they need? How are they doing in their life, or something like that? So there might be some tiny little through line, but otherwise, I want no part of that. That's like, that doesn't do me. I'm not happier. I feel alienated from everybody because I've just judged them all and think they're all falling short or something like that. And I'm pathetic. I'm unemployed. I've got nothing going on in my life, And
but you got a cool seat at the mall there. Like,
that's
nice
right.
bench. Your parents don't come to pick you up.
And I've got quality time to sit there and judge people.
That's such a great example. Thank you for bringing that up and for your honesty on that. And there's two ways in which the Lord can. I used to have like the same kind of spirit doing different things, but it's like the Lord can lead you out of that in two ways, through the miracle of becoming old and 40. One thing is, I know right now, if I, looking like me now, walked by you on the bench, you guys would be like, look at that guy. He's like old like dad
totally.
bod. He's bald and he doesn't even it's like, one, you'd know like, hey man, that's not like when you're young and cool, it's like, yeah, man. But now it's like, hey, man, leave me alone. It's like with hell, you think we're like hell is like influencing our minds to do that stuff. You think we're all in it together. We're all the friends but you don't realize they would turn on you in a second.
Yes, they would. There's no loyalty and no love there. That's right. No, and as long as you're serving their thing, their agenda, they're all right with you.
Yeah.
But the second you turn, it's going to be like the Egyptian feeling about the children of Israel when they said, actually, we just want to go 3 days to go do this worship thing. They go, no, we're doubling your workload.
Yeah.
They're not the slightest bit interested in you doing what you want to do or what you feel free about.
So Hellish,
and it's such satisfaction to get to the point of feeling love for people. Like once your heart opens up and you realize people exist outside of you as independent beings and they're struggling, they've got their journey and the Lord loves them and everything.
Yeah.
It's a kind of pleasure and delight, but it's slow to swap those it's like very hard to get to the point of enjoying something that you formerly didn't enjoy, and to break that joy that was unhealthy and antisocial, and to get to a point where no, you're having something that makes a contribution. That's a better place to be.
And just in case anyone's watching this and you're like, well, how do you do that? I would say I have no idea. I have never in my life set out and successfully improved myself morally. Like sure there's like, but it's all like divine providence does that. God does it, and he'll do it through basically empathy crash courses when things don't go that well for you and you feel bad. Who knows? There's a million ways he sneaks it in there, but it's not like I bootstrapped myself up to realizing the error of my ways. It's just like, no, that's what the Lord does.
A lot of it is, for me, is becoming aware that my plot was full of weeds. If I was so lucky to have any dirt at all, it's full of weeds and thorns, and then really looking at those weeds and really looking at those thorns, and then trying to pull a few, although the roots are still in there. They're going to keep coming up. But working away a little bit at it, which is not fun at all. But over time, then a little space gets cleared, and then you start to see something come up. Oh, and that's kind of neat. It's a better flower. But I had nothing to do with that. I don't know how to make that flower. I don't know how to make that happen.
Yeah, all you know is
like,
you
clear a little space and it happens.
Yank, like you're taking out the weeds. I know yank. I can do that. I can yank a weed out. But to grow something good, it's like, oh, there's a tiny little seed with DNA in there, and it has to split open right when the right temperature and light is, and then it has to replicate all these different cells and send down these feeder roots and something nitrogen and something photosynthesis. All this, you just know, like yank. That's really how it is.
That's our job.
And that's all we're asked to do.
Right.
It's like, I think this might not be good. I won't do it.
That's right.
This time, one or like 4 out of 9 times, 5 out of 9 times, I will not do this. That's it. That's the best that we can do, and that's fine. Swedenborg explicitly says that it's not so hard to live a heavenly life as people think.
That's what he says.
It's just about, are you overall trying to use your freedom in a world that rewards you both for good and evil to do what's good. That's it. That's all you need to do.
And a law of averages, not that you did something good 5 years ago, but that there's going to be a little effort today, kind of thing. Just try to get it on the averages.
All right.